All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to Perspectives webinar series. We're going to give everybody just a couple more minutes to join us. I can see the people piling in. It's always the most exciting time. A lot of anxious folks. I wonder if you might head to the chat like we always do. Tell us where you're calling in from. But also, today is Say Hi Day. So, my question for you, the little icebreaker, what's your favorite one-liner when you're greeting a friend? When you see somebody, maybe you haven't seen them in a while, what do you like to say? So, where are you calling in from and what do you like to say? I saw somebody the other day. I hadn't expected to see her. I was like, no way. That was the only thing that came to my mind. I don't think that's the best one. I don't recommend you use that at home, but it was very authentic in the moment. See Marilyn text. Oh, I missed you. I like that one. That's a good one. I'm gonna pretend you're talking to me. Look at this. Hey, you. Love it. Love it. Long time no see. There's a classic. I like that. Boston's, what are you up to? Nice. How do you do from Maryland? Dig it. It's great to see your face. Well, that's nice. Man, y'all are good at this. Waterloo, Canada. Hi. Hey, girly, looking good. Like that. There we go. What are you drinking? Okay, I dig it. I dig it. What's up? Keep it simple. Always tried and true. Oh, just lift my chin. There you go. Amy's got it. It's like, what's up? Subtle. If you're just joining us, we're letting us know where we're coming from, and today is Say Hi Day. So what's your favorite one-liner when you're greeting a friend? If you're confused, if you're reading the chat, you just got here. Well, what's up, rocker? I like that, Trish. Nice. Christina, great to see that smile. Man, everybody's so positive. I dig this. This is so cool. All right, we are at 2:02, so I'm going to move us forward here a little bit and go ahead and get us started by kicking off the show. I'm your host, Matt Pepsel, the Godfather of Talent Optimization, and I'm very excited to introduce you to today's panelists here on our Perspectives webinar series. This month is all about the HR Career Compass. We're talking all about how to plan out HR careers and how these things unfold. And my first guest that we'll talk about here as panelist is Amy Baer. She's the Global Director of DE&I Engagement and Culture at Duck Creek Technologies. With nearly 20 years of HR experience spanning technology, publishing, manufacturing, and healthcare, Amy has led strategic high-impact initiatives that strengthen belonging, leadership development, and organizational effectiveness. Amy, thanks so much for being with us today.
Hi, Matt. Nice to be here.
Next up, we have Emily Wilbrandt. We had expected to have Tracy on the show, but Tracy developed a conflict. So Emily stepped up and is going to be filling in today. And Emily, I'm so glad that you're here. Emily Wilbrandt is the People Operations Manager here at the Predictive Index, where I work. She is currently responsible for recruiting and retaining top talent. This includes talent acquisition, performance management, employee relations and engagement, and management of PI's wellness program. Emily, thanks for being awesome and thanks for being here.
Of course. If it's easier for you to call me Tracy at any point in time, feel free if you have
I
that.
think I'll keep it straight. And last but certainly not least, we have Kelly Bliss. Kelly is the president of US Group Health at Teladoc Health. She oversees strategy, product, marketing, sales, consumer engagement, client management, and client and commercial operations for the business. Now, on our show today, Kelly will be telling us about how she made the shift from HR leadership roles to the business side. Kelly, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, and call me Emily or Tracy or Kelly, whatever you choose.
It's about to get really weird. I love it. I love it. I think I'll be able to keep it straight. So I'm going to move us forward here and talk about just a little bit of housekeeping. So the question we get asked probably the most often is, will the webinar be recorded? Which of course it will. And you'll find that in the email follow-up once we have that ready for you tomorrow. Now, we're going to have an audience Q&A portion. If this is your first time being at Perspectives, we're going to have that toward the end of the show. And if you have a question for our panelists, first of all, we love it. Second of all, you're going to want to use the Q&A button inside of Zoom so that we're sure that we can see that. If you put it in chat, we might see it. If you put it in the Q&A, we will see it. And you're going to want to stick around to the end. We've got some bonus resources for you, ways to get in touch with our panelists, and we'll give you a preview of next month's webinar. So let's... I wanted to open the frame like this and say that a lot of times in my experience, HR professionals do so much in helping with career scaffolding, development, career pathing and planning and all these things for everybody across the organization. And we need you to do those things for us, of course. But I want to give us permission today for you to think about your own career. I'm so glad you're with us today because I think it's sometimes so easy to be so giving to other people that we kind of take the eye off of our own career path and development. And then we find that we're kind of down the road and we're like, wait, am I making the progress I want? Am I going in the direction that I want. So today, I want us to give ourselves permission to just really be focused on you about it. Think about your own career, ask questions to our panel, be inspired by their stories and their sage advice. And I just really want this to be all about you. Rachel, if I can go on to the next slide, though, I found this pretty interesting. This is from AIHR, which is the Academy to Innovate HR. And it's a very colorful graphic. I know it's kind of small, but the point that it's making is that moving from sort of tactical to strategic opportunities that have more experience, there's lots of different jobs and roles within HR, depending on the size of your organization. And there's lots of different paths that you can take. So I think that it really showed me the staggering variety of the specializations available within HR and how they start to become more senior. And I had to add an orange dotted line for someone like Kelly, who parlayed all that great HR experience to switch over to become a business executive. So that's a possibility as well. So I find that when there's so many different pathways, a lot of times we can start to get a little bit overwhelmed sometimes. Sometimes we don't know how, what the qualifications are or what our options are. So I think we're going to pull this apart a little bit today, and that's what I'm excited to do. But we'll go on to the next slide, and we're going to actually have our classic Menti poll. If you have one of your fancy phones, you can take a picture of that QR code that's on the screen, or you can head over to the chat. We've got a link for you. You can just click over there and participate in your browser. We've just got a really quick 2-question poll for you so we can learn a little bit about you as the audience. And for our panelists, I'll ask you to respond as well as I do. The first question, career-oriented, where do you see yourself in 3 years? So the first one is same role, stuck. Second one, same role, but deeper expertise. The third one, HR team leader, director, VP, one of those middle leaders. C-suite HR role, so the most senior HR person in the building. Maybe pivoting to freelance or fractional. And then the last one, pivoting to non-HR function, like you did, Kelly. So I guess my first question, panelists, what do you think? Any surprises, any shocks by what you're seeing on the screen?
Well, speaking from the pivot to non-HR, I'm thrilled to see 11 people are considering it. So
Right?
my 11 peeps on this call, but yeah, I'm surprised actually. I would have anticipated people sort of following and getting deeper in their own subject matter expertise or taking more of a leadership role within HR. So it is surprising.
Yeah, I'm no expert in this matter, but I definitely see a lot of non-business people coming into HR. I don't see as many going from HR out. But Tracy, who we mentioned at the top, I met Tracy 8 years ago, and she said, I'm a businesswoman who happens to work in HR. That's how she introduced herself to me. And I thought, whoa, I like you. So there you go. So yeah, anything else? Emily, what do you think? You surprised?
I don't think so. I think I would put myself in one of these
Popular
highest
buckets,
buckets here, one of these popular ones. So it's good to know where people are at, and we can try to keep that in mind as we talk about things today.
I dig it. I dig it. All right. Well, let's go on to the next one. This one's open-ended. What's the biggest obstacle you face in advancing your HR career? And these are just going to pop up on the screen as you enter them. What's the biggest obstacle that stands before you in advancing that HR career of yours? Layoffs, all caps. Lack of opportunities, no HR certification, stuck in TA, right? Getting my foot in the door, not knowing what I can do, right? How about that? Small organization, yep. Self-doubt, might be talking about that today. Certifications, breaking into industry, red tape, lack of policies, flat organization. That's kind of the new thing. It's not that new, but it's definitely something we're hearing a lot about. Higher education, just even the industry is going to keep me back. Yep. Job market, imposter syndrome. So it's interesting. We're seeing a lot of these sort of externalities and the internalities. Like I told you, panelists, this audience is very impressive. They've got the holistic approach here. Switching from marketing, look at that, coming into HR. I like that. Budget, not feeling fulfilled, confidence, lots of imposter syndrome. Yeah. Well, I'm going to definitely think that our panelists are going to be touching on a lot of this today. So thanks so much for giving us that glimpse. It really helps us to kind of dial in the show and make sure that it's a good fit for you and that we're delivering the best content that we can. So thanks again for sharing that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just bring us into panel mode. So Rachel will move away. Rachel's a real person, by the way, if you're joining us the show for the first time. She's my executive producer. She's not AI. She's not, we didn't make her up. She's controlling things behind the scenes. But the first question I have, and Amy, maybe you can get us started with this one. When you think about your own HR progression. We just heard the audience share some of their challenges. What kind of these challenges did you face in your own sort of steps when you were taking on your journey, and what did you do to overcome them?
Yeah, no, great question. And I love seeing, what was, people were saying, because it kind of gives me an insight that maybe I wasn't alone. I, I always had this idea that I needed to stay as an HR business partner. I needed to stay as a generalist. I needed to stay because I was worried about layoffs and we saw that come up. But I also needed to upskill myself. And I was, hesitant to do that. I was a mom. I had a lot of things going on at work, so it was hard to do but balance both of those things. And so I really had to, I kind of held myself back for a long time. And I think I played it safe and I would apply for the same kind of roles, just the same manager roles. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it was probably reflective of where I was at in my lifetime. But I had, someone who really gave me some feedback that they're like, hey, why do you keep applying for the same roles? And kind of held that mirror up that I needed. And I started to really think about that and just start to really challenge myself. And so that's when I made a decision that I was going to move from being an HR business partner into a more specialized role, leading DE&I culture and engagement. But I was, also told I didn't have experience in that area, even though that was work that I was doing. And they said to me, hey, just know when you get into this role, you got to get a certification within it quickly. So just for some of those people saying that, know that I got the job and then I got the certification. So you can kind of do both. And then at the same time, I then got my master's degrees. I think once I got the confidence from the certification that I could do it, I then went ahead and got a master's degree. And I'm really happy I did that.
It sounds like there was like a key shift that took place inside you, and it really unlocked a lot of what then helped you get to that next level more comfortably, I'd say.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
and I think just to being transparent too, I have my sons were in high school and they were getting older and I could start to focus more on me and my career. And then really what I started to get more in tune with, hey, where do I want to see myself? I've been maybe holding back for a couple of years. I also was out of the workforce and I returned back in. And so my focus can shift on, okay, let's get back at this and really dive back into my career.
Nice. Well, Kelly, I'll ask you the same question. What kind of challenges did you face, and what did you do, or what allowed you to overcome those?
Well, thanks everybody. The panel's fantastic. I'm thrilled to be here. And I think as you spoke to on the kickoff, I was only in HR for the early stage of my career, really the early part of my career, and I think it helped that I was bad at it. I to be candid, I frequently would get feedback like, I know you're trying to be transparent, but you've got to, soften your messaging or nuance your messaging. Or I was a little hard and direct, I guess I would say, in my early career, and it didn't play out all that well. But truth be told, I think that what it did create was. I kind of was a little different, right? I mean, early on, it was obvious that I kind of didn't quite fit the mold. And I think I had a few very, powerful conversations with former CEOs and bosses that I had, sort of suggesting that maybe I take on more leadership, more other functions, not just HR. And so I think for me, the challenges that I had maybe earlier on were that I had to translate the competencies that I had built in my early career in HR into something else. And for me, that was it was grounded in just HR people are generally good people, right? Like we operate with sort of higher EQs, and you can navigate those. And I had to be able to translate that into this new phase of my career and take those competencies and sort of map them to other areas and sort of make sure that I was doing it in a way that was not just masking the new competencies that I had to build. So really what it was about was like breaking down, all right, I'm really good at these things. I love bringing together high performing teams. I'm pretty good at selecting talent. As I said earlier, I'm pretty direct. So how do I parlay those things into a new a new spot, which for me, it started, my first bridge was a chief of staff role, taking on a broader global leadership team. But what were those competencies that I needed to build to be successful in this new role? I was very deliberate about it. I was pretty nervous, honestly, getting over that hurdle of self-doubt. And I was able to really sort of pick apart what are those things that I haven't had exposure to or I'm not good at. And I actually deliberately had a plan against how to build out those competencies. How do I run a P&L? How do I understand a P&L? How do I effectively drive, a sales function or any function that I didn't have exposure to prior? So for me, it was the challenge became mapping those competencies.
I love the example that you provided because you went over and then up. So you took and kept the essential elements of that core part of the HR role, like you said, with that high EQ and being good at the people functions, but then kind of went over and built those through chief of staff and then said, wow, look at all these other things. You over time built all those capabilities and took it to the presidency where you are now. It's
Right.
that's powerful stuff. I love it. And Emily, round us out. Same question to you. Challenges you're facing along the way. We love to get the different points of view from all of our panelists. And then what'd you do about it?
Sure. I think for me, I found pretty early on that I loved HR, I loved recruiting, and talent acquisition is kind of specifically where I fit into things. But for me, the challenge was finding the right place to do that at. So, like, what's the right work environment, company, culture? And I knew I wanted to do the job, but where did I want to do it? So it was a lot of trial and error for me. I worked at a company with 10 people. I worked at a company with 1,000 people. I always say predictive index is like the Goldilocks, just right size, or about 200. And that I have found is a good fit where like I know everyone, but there's still room to grow. And I think sometimes what you have in your head is like the ideal fit. You try and find out it's not. So I had always had in my head, like, I love education. I'm going to work in higher ed. And then I got there and I was like, oh my, everything's so slow and there's so much bureaucracy and like, I can't function like this. And now I have finally found myself at a ever-changing, fast-paced tech software company. And for some people, they love that. And for some people, they don't. So just finding kind of what works for you, what's going to align best with, the environment that you're going to thrive in. Took me a couple tries to figure out, but I think I finally got it.
Can I add on to that, Matt? Do you
Please,
mind?
yeah.
Because Emily, that's just such a great point too. I think that for a long time thought that, oh gosh, I've worked at a lot of different places trying to find the right fit, but it really gives you that good perspective out there. Like where do you thrive? But also you learn a lot about cultures and different leadership styles. And I just really think that, for anybody listening to the call, I think that's a really great thing to do. So great
Yeah.
advice.
Well, and I think, Kelly, from your perspective, even without having to necessarily shift companies, you shifted roles. You went from chief of staff, you talked about taking on other opportunities. And I think, again, that same parallel of the more perspective you have across the business or across even the market to figure out, like, where am I the best fit? Where can I add the most value? It seems like it really makes you that much more valuable because you really find you hit that groove. Am I reading that right, Kelly?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is I find myself focusing on the talent a few layers down, because if I reflect on those moments in time, the thing that Amy mentioned it earlier, but the thing that sort of pushed me over the hurdle of like, okay, am I really going to do this and backfill my old HR role with someone else? I'm hiring my replacement. That was the moment of like, okay, there's no going back. It was because I had somebody in a mentor role, even if they weren't a direct formal mentor, that person was a bit of a sounding board, or actually more so an advocate when I wasn't in the room, to see the competencies and the skills that I was bringing to the table, the outcomes that I was delivering in a new way. And I think that was really powerful, not only for the people that were in that room that I wasn't at the time, but more so coming back and telling me, no, wait a minute, don't dismiss over your skills over here. They're really good at it, and you really need to challenge yourself to pivot. So I think so I try to do that and sort of pay that forward as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, it's another common thread for the three of you, knowing you a little bit as I do. You've each had powerful mentors in your life that have provided you with that guidance in your career in different ways, sometimes from the business, sometimes from within HR, whatever it might be. But, for you, everybody who's listening in, the question is, if you had to name, like, who is your mentor? Like, who's somebody who's giving you really good advice because they've been there, who's going to advocate for you when you're not in the room? If a name doesn't immediately jump to mind, that could be a key takeaway for you, is to figure out, like, how do I find a mentor? How do I develop that type of relationship? So we might come back to that. And if you have any questions on that, just put them in the Q&A for us. But Emily, I want to ask you this. I think a lot of times, especially early career people, they look to the top of an organization and say, okay, who runs the place? And that'd be the chief HR officer or the chief people officer, or whatever it might be. And so it's natural to think about the path going from entry level all the way to the CHRO. My question to you about that path is, has it changed at all? I mean, everything, it seems, from my view, has changed in the last 5 years or so. But is it still the same, or is there some of it that's evergreen, or are there new sort of dimensions or wrinkles that have kind of developed in terms of going up more of a traditional kind of career ladder in that way?
Yeah, it's a good question and definitely something I think about. Our chief people officer here at Predictive Index is definitely someone that I say, like, I want to be her when I grow up. And so how do I go from where I am now to becoming Jackie Doobie is a great question I think about every night. But I think about this in a couple different ways. So from just a purely like talent acquisition, observing industry trends, like high level viewpoint, I would say certainly that it's changed and it's not as linear as it used to be. So I definitely see more chief HR officers that might have spent time in other business units, like leading organizational wide change initiatives. I think lateral moves and career pivots are more common than they used to be. I think you see more chief HR officers now with more cross-functional backgrounds. So maybe they came from ops or finance. They didn't come up through a standard like generalist, manager, director, VP, like you used to, which I think opens the door for like more folks and folks with a broader variety of backgrounds and experiences, not just having that traditional compliance background, which I think is a benefit for businesses. Um, so I think part of that is also just a testament to the evolution of the chief HR officer role itself. I think now chief HR officers, and I think about, again, our chief people officer, they're so much more trusted and expected to be strategic business partners to the CEO and to the leadership team, versus just staying in their traditional HR lane. So if I think about the leadership team here at PI, what we call our chiefs and seniors team, our chief people officer is very much a key member of that group and involved in influencing key drivers of business success on a regular basis. So she's included in those decision-making processes around things like our product changes, our business strategy, our corporate development strategy. We're not just going to her to say, what changes should we make in the benefits this year? She's a part of all of these big decisions that the leadership team is making. So that's kind of that's my take on it.
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but as you look at the layers of people operations, for example, in an organization like ours, everybody has some level of business acumen and business fluency. They understand how their counterparts work. So whether you're in a TA role and you're like, I need to know sort of what the job is and what your function does so I can help you find the best fit. But by the time you get to somebody at the chief people officer level, like the lines really get blurry. You're like, you sound like a business person to me. When you're just taking the people angle in a more refined way than anybody else perhaps at the table. But it's really, I hadn't thought about that. So appreciate that, Emily. But I'll move us to the next question with this one. And it comes up all the time, and I've even seen it pop up in the chat today. How should I think about HR specialist versus generalist? I come from the business side, so we don't always have these things the same way. But in terms of career progression, since that's the topic for today, what are some of the things I should be thinking about in terms of making that decision or switching within generalist versus specialist? And Amy, maybe you can help me kind of get straight on that.
Yeah, no, and it kind of goes back to all the things we've talked about. I found a really great company that I'm at right now, Duck Creek Technologies, and the leader that we had in place, making that move over from an HR business partner to that specialist role really probably wasn't as hard, because I knew that she was going to lead and guide me, had my back, and she believed in me. So I think ultimately that did also help my confidence. Now, I was hesitant. I think, Matt, I've shared this story with you before. I told her I was going to apply for the role that I am in right now. And then I told her I wasn't, because I still doubted it, made that change over. And I have to say, for any of you out there that are just even remotely thinking about it or doubting it, please do it. Stretch yourself. It has opened so many doors for me that I never think I would have had as an HR business partner. The work that I'm doing right now for me is bringing me so much joy. I'm so glad I made the change, but I want to emphasize, I think it was a right time because I'm at a great company with a great leader. So just really think about that. Like, do you have the support system in place? As Matt talked about, do you have a mentor? These are all really important things. But I think, as Emily just brilliantly laid out, HR has changed so much. I came up in HR starting in 1995, and the world has changed. I'll have to admit, I really thought I was going to be a chief people officer. That was my end goal. Now I just really want to keep doing what I'm doing. And there's so many more opportunities within HR. I never dreamed I get to work on the stuff that I do. So I hope that answers that a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think it's, like I said, I'm hearing that there's some sense of movement that we can make if we're intentional about it, if we make sure that it's authentic for us. We shouldn't feel like we have to do something necessarily, because if you try it and it's not a great fit, I think whether it's, you talked about company size earlier, or whether it's the specialist versus generalist, go to something you're naturally driven towards. And I think, Kelly, you gave us the example about just who you even are, and saying, well, then you're going to need to change up the way that you contribute here. And it just unlocked all this potential for you. It's very cool. But Kelly, I'm going to keep you on this one for a second, if I could, which is on this topic of business acumen. I brought it up a little bit earlier. So who better to ask when it comes to how should I think about developing business acumen, whether it's to make a leap over to the other side, to the business like yourself, or whether it's just to be a strong business partner to the business. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just on the former part, I'd love to, I have a famous quote that I say to my husband all the time, actually. I'm good at other things, especially when it comes to cooking, because I'm really like just a terrible cook, or wrapping presents. I don't have the patience for it. So I think identifying what you're good at, I mean, fundamentally is, for me, early in my career, the specialist generalist thing, I would go back and forth, and I found at the end of the day, I was just pretty good at benefits. And so like I ended up just in that, it squarely sort of focusing on those competencies. But in terms of business acumen, I think this is really timely. We just brought in some new HR talent to our organization, and we've been spending some one-on-one time. And one of the new HR business partners that is supporting my business has said, talk to me about what it is that you'd like to see in an HR business partner. And my reflection is very clear. I think that the best HR business partners, the best strategic partners, I would say, to our business have been two things. One, have a deep, deep understanding of the finances of the organization. I think it is power. It is power for an HR professional, because you can speak a different language within the business, not only the people language. You can speak the finance and people language, and you can speak the finance language with the people perspective, which is a unique combination. So I'd say that. And then second is a really well-informed and well-articulated point of view regarding the talent and people strategy, and how you can support that, right? So net, follow the money, and then apply your learning, your unique perspective on how to support the growth of the business and that money. Understand deeply those parts of the organization that you could see as levers. Those I think I think Emily said it, is those conversations that happen about a strategic decision, business decision. We happen to be publicly traded. There's a lot that we talk about in terms of just, our business that has very little to do with the people of the business, about the finance, about the growth, about the strategic implications of decision A versus decision B. And yet, with pride, we put our chief human resources officer in that room because we're not all thinking like that, and we need the diversity of thought, but you have to be able to actually understand the business to have a spot. You shouldn't ever just be granted a seat at the table for the sake of having a seat at the table. You should be able to contribute.
And just to clarify, so when we're talking about following the money, it's beyond payroll, for example, or what's market for this role, and how can we afford the role versus our straw person diagram of how the finances are going to go. You're talking about how the business actually makes or saves, or you're talking about following the money, like from a business engine perspective, right?
Totally. Sorry. So the HR being the cost part of the equation, and revenue being, the supply part, right? So if you understand how how the revenue is generated within the company, that becomes true power. And you're not only focused on cost savings, you're able to actually complete the picture. You understand how we're making money, where we're spending money, and then therefore what our net positive, net profits are. So
Yeah.
ultimately, I think the end-to-end view is super powerful for an HR person.
Love that. Love that. And I've always been taught that it's human capital that creates all the other forms of capital in any business. So it really comes down to, if you take that mindset, you're doing what Kelly suggested, and really getting into the powerful parts about, I understand the business and I understand the people. That's a double weapon right there. That's really good.
And the finance team's willing to partner with you. And that's actually how I did it. I pulled over somebody from finance by the ear and was like, I need to understand this at a much deeper level. And so he was very generous with his time and allowed me to ask behind closed doors the dumb questions around, like, well, wait a minute, how does this work? What do you mean by EBITDA and before and below the line and all of that nonsense?
Yeah.
They're willing to do
Cool.
it.
It's so cool. And as somebody who has run product and other types of business lines for a long time, we also enjoy talking about our business. If you come in and take an active interest in having us explain it, it's not threatening because you're not necessarily in the chain of command the same way, but it's also a chance for us to say, well, that is a good question. So even the questions you might think are like, well, these are pretty basic questions. Don't be surprised if you get them thinking. So it's really powerful, that type of tandem. I really like that. But Emily, I'm going to ask you the same question because it kind of came up in one of your earlier responses too when we talked about business acumen. Just to complement Kelly's own perspective, when you want to talk about developing business acumen and being a good business partner, like what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, such a great question. So when I first came to Predictive Index, I had never worked at a software company before, and I had a lot to learn. And so I think just being curious, spending time with different teams, shadowing their meetings, I would ask engineers, like, can I come to your Scrum meeting? I don't know what that is. I want to shadow it. I want to learn more. And for the most part, you'll find that people will say yes. If you're curious and you're willing to learn, ask those questions. Getting involved in a company-wide OKR or company-wide initiative was a huge benefit to me, to learning a little bit more about the ins and outs and kind of the full bigger picture of a company. Get a mentor in a different department who is a senior leader. I think I saw this in the chat, or I think Kelly maybe touched on this as well. My mentor was the VP of Finance, and I chose her specifically because I wanted her to explain P&L sheets to me. I wanted to know our different, sources of revenue and where is our funding coming from. And we're lucky we work in a very transparent organization. There's a public spreadsheet, right, that has every software that we use and how much it costs. So I think probably PI more than most shares that type of information so you can understand where the money's going, how it's coming in. But ask questions. What's the worst, the VP of Finance can say is no, right? No, I don't have time to show you that thing, right? But there's no harm in asking, and it shows you're curious and interested and that you want to learn. So I would say those are some of the crucial pieces to kind of being considered a strategic business partner.
Yeah, love that. And every no is just a not now, right? You can keep asking. It won't hurt. They'll be fine. But I give us a little bit of a hard shift here. And Amy, I think, let's say that now I'm at the stage where I've done the things, I feel like I'm doing a good job, I'm making the efforts to learn the business and be a good business partner, but I'm just not getting noticed for the efforts. I'm just getting overlooked for whatever reason. what should I do? What should I think about? How should I approach a situation where I feel like people just aren't taking notice of my efforts and my capabilities?
Yeah, and I just want to share, this is my perspective, but I think all of us have had this happen, at one time or another. And I've struggled with it. I have been really thoughtful about it. And I start to really ask myself a couple of different questions because, as Emily brought up, and even Kelly, I've worked at a couple different places. And I really want to be thoughtful if I'm, feeling this way, am I still learning in my role? I start to really ask myself, is there ways that I can keep learning? Am I stretching myself? Do I like the people that I'm working with? Am I getting access to good projects and good work? And I really just try to anchor myself back to that and focus on that because I'm telling you, I do believe the notice will come from that. But I've also, I've gotten to a certain point in my career too that I realize like that recognition and that feeling good about my work really has to start with me and has to come from me. And I need to be my biggest cheerleader and my biggest advocate at all times. So I can't wait for others to notice me. I need to feel good about the work I'm doing. And then I need to let, everybody know, but I also think the work will show. And I feel like when I start to shift my mindset, kind of quiet that ego part down, it really, brings everything back into perspective for me.
I like it. I'm going to move us on because I've got a couple more questions I want to be sure to get to before we have the open audience Q&A. And my next question is that I've noticed as an outsider a little bit that HR professionals have a lot of different certifications, a lot of degree paths. We've just been talking about this a little bit. Emily, what do you think when it comes to some of these other HR degrees or certifications? Like, how do I make the decision whether it's worth it or not? I actually teach graduate school for HR at Boston College, so I have a vested interest in hearing your answer to this. But I'm also just curious, like, for people who are in the audience listening, like how do I approach thinking about certification, degree, yes, no?
Sure. I have a bit of a hot take here. It may not be the popular opinion, so I will fully own that. But my answer is no, not required. I don't have a degree in HR. I have a degree in social work. Do I think it's valuable and do I use it on a day-to-day basis? Probably. But I don't have an HR degree. I find just from a talent acquisition standpoint, so many places are actually moving away from degree requirements altogether. It's something that helps us promote equity. Not all folks have the same access to degree programs or resources or opportunities. And so we find that we get more diverse talent by removing that degree requirement and giving more people that opportunity. So that's kind of the angle that I come from. I did go through the SHRM certification process probably 5 or 6 years ago. To be honest, I have not used a ton of that information. I've been more specialized in talent acquisition, so that is probably part of it. But yeah,
Like it.
my
You're
answer is
spicy
no.
today. You're spicy
Yeah.
today, Emily. I love
I
it.
am
That's great.
spicy.
Uh,
Go get your experience, save your money, get a good mentor. Um,
yeah.
that's
As a professor, you hurt my heart a little bit, but I
I
do agree.
I
I do
do
agree with you.
apologize, but
No,
that
it's
is my hot take of the
I'm
day.
with you 100%. I think it's so situational too, right? So a lot of times what I saw, a lot of it was the imposter syndrome that showed up. I have to tell you, of the students in my class, and I'd say about half come from the business who are trying to get advanced HR degrees, or half are already in HR and want to reach that next level. I think it goes a long way towards confidence of saying, I want this validation that I'm at a master's level, for example, in HR. And it plays different roles, but it definitely needs a lot of thought, as you pointed out, Emily. But Kelly, I want to ask you this question. When it comes time to leave, I am suspected that, you know what, my next best opportunity is either in another part of the business or maybe another company altogether. How should I approach it? Because I'm in HR. Is it the same if I decide that it's time to go versus if, one of the line of business people decides it's time for them to go?
All right, Emily, this is my hot take.
I'm bracing for
I mean,
impact.
yeah, this is maybe just personal. I think this is your decision to leave is your decision to leave. And where I struggle is don't half-ass that decision. That decision, you should own it. Due diligence to it, meaning have the conviction around that I've thought through this decision. If I'm going to leave the organization, I'm going to leave the organization. It's personal. Have a clear head on it, have a plan of action. what I struggle with is, hey, I'm thinking about leaving. I think it's really the wrong message to send to your organization. It's the wrong, it's just the wrong approach. It puts the monkey on their back. Like, I just don't think it's like it's the right strategy. So from my hot take is just don't half-ass it, decide to leave, and then have a plan to leave. And so from an HR perspective, yeah, I think, again, in that vein, I wouldn't, I'm not a big fan of paying someone to leave, promoting someone that is at because they're threatening to leave. It's just not how I roll, I guess. So from that take, I think there's either you're managing your career and identifying the path forward and the competencies that you need to move into new roles, expanded roles, transition to other functions, other roles, or you're opting to change companies. I do think there was, and I saw the chat's moving quick, but I thought I saw some chatter around industry, and I think there is something to be said about identifying an industry and building your competency either around your specialty. I'm a benefits specialist, comp and ben. I'm going to really go deep there, or I'm going to stay in this industry and I'm going to expand and go deep in this industry, and I'll know this industry inside and out, whether it's software, tech, healthcare, whatever that industry is. I do think it's beneficial to do one or the other. So I've relied heavily on my healthcare orientation. I've been in healthcare my whole career, in different capacities, in tech organizations, actually healthcare architecture organization, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think there's benefit in that. So my advice is, think long and hard about it, make a plan and decide.
Love that. Love that. I also think, just to build one more point on that, when you have your whole career effectively in healthcare, I mean, that's your whole network. I mean, you could pick up the phone, I'm sure, and get anybody to answer that you want. And if you were to say, like, I'm just going to do manufacturing, you're like, uh-oh, you might be experienced as heck, but who do you know to call? So yeah. I think it's one of those things where be specialized, make those network connections, develop that expertise, learn how the entire industry works. I mean, you're on the part of understanding how your own company works. I mean, you know how the whole industry works. It's like, that's tremendously valuable. So
yeah,
absolutely. I like it. Well, we are at time for the audience Q&A portion of the show. So for audience members, I know we've got some questions that have already come in. While you're getting your questions together, I just want to go ahead and make sure that we're throwing a link in the chat. It's just to recognize the fact that from a sponsor perspective, companies are using talent optimization to deliver the results through people better and faster than ever. And if you're interested in learning more about the Predictive Index platform, or maybe you have some familiarity with it, or maybe you want to be a consultant who helps clients really take their organizations to the next level, you can just let us know in that chat. But we're going to go ahead and move on to the audience Q&A portion of the show. The first question, we have had multiple people who've asked this. Can you please define or elaborate on fractional HR roles? Yeah, I saw that show up in the Menti polls, but we didn't really talk about it as much. And so maybe I'll just say something real quickly on that one. I think it's a trend that we see more and more often, that a lot of HR professionals I know who are moving into fractional roles. It's not a panacea in the sense that now you have clients and you're constantly doing business development. So it doesn't come free, but I think that increasingly there are certain classes of companies that really like fractional. They may not need a full-time CHRO. Can I get 20 hours a week? And can I find a couple clients and cobble it together? There's also freedom on the part of the fractional HR person to say, you know what, I'm not stuck working for just one employer. I can, kind of diversify a little bit too, and fit a lifestyle in some cases better. So lots of things about fractional. If Tracy were here, I'd go much deeper on that, but I'll move us on to this next question, and it's for Amy. Where did you receive your HR certifications from, Amy? Do you have any recommended institutions?
Yeah, I received my certification from Cornell, and I think it's a really wonderful certification program. I highly recommend it. And I think too, Matt, I agree with you that really came confidence from having that certification and that master's degree. And because when I was returning back to the workforce, I mean, I did have someone say to me, hey, when I compare you to another candidate, you don't have a master's degree, and I didn't get that job. So I don't know that I necessarily needed it, but I feel like you're right. There was a switch in me, and it was something also that I always wanted to do. So I recommend Cornell. And then I did my master's degree from Lewis University. They had an online program in in leadership. So
Yeah, very nice. I love that. Kelly, I'm going to give you this one, which is, what is the difference between a mentor and a sponsor? Which one should someone who is currently transitioning look for first, mentor versus sponsor?
That's a great question. I don't even think I know the answer. I guess I'll give you my 2 cents on it. Mentor feels to me, I'm in a room of HR people, so you're going to have to answer this. I think the mentor relationship feels a little bit more formalized than sponsor, but I could be wrong on that one. I have had both. I've actually enjoyed having a dedicated mentor where we had, programmatic relationship around, we got together in a certain interval and talked about certain things. And then I've had sponsors where they were business partners, people, coworkers, other parts, people that were in other parts of the business that I would say it's about what happens behind closed doors when you're not in the room. I mentioned that earlier, and they were sponsoring my abilities, I guess is how I would say it. So for me, it was more informal. And I would share with them what I'm working on, what I'm trying to work towards, and the struggles that I'm having and the successes that I'm having. I got some advice early, in my career where someone told me, hey, if you're working on something, make sure to tell people you're working on it. It's so that they have a benchmark to compare if you're improving, right? And so I think, having done many a 360 in my career, I think it's really helpful when you start to shape, got this feedback and I'm actively working on it. Can you hold me accountable? Or can I'm going to show up a little differently in these meetings. I'm going to point to it for you before the meeting, just so you can see and measure my, impact. So I don't know that I answered the question, but that's my take on my hot take on mentors and sponsors.
Yeah, I think between mentors, coaches, sponsors, advocates, we have a lot of different terms for it. I'm with you, Kelly. I think mentors are somebody who's been there, done that before, and they're willing to and able to give you the advice and open doors for you and make connections and advocate for you and all those things. Sometimes people hire career coaches because they can manage a process and help you kind of get out of your own way, sort of as you pursue it. And sometimes mentorship programs are formal, sometimes it's informal. So I think that whatever the terms are, I think you go back to figure out what is it that I feel like I need the most. And a lot of times, and this happens when we're kind of held back or overlooked, having somebody in the room who's willing to advocate and say, hey, you know what, you should think about Emily for that. Have you asked her to join this, OKR type thing? And that really opens doors. And sometimes, unfortunately, you can be as capable as you want. Sometimes people just don't notice. And when they have somebody at a very senior level saying and advocating for you that way, sometimes that's what it takes. And once you get in the role, do the hell out of it, and then you're in good shape. Here's a tough one. This is a toughie. So total panel here. What advice would you give if I can't get promoted without specific experience, but I also don't have access to the experience since my company wants somebody that can hit the ground running without support? So it's that catch-22 of saying, I don't have the experience, but you won't let me get the experience because you want somebody who's already experienced. Like, how do I break through all that noise?
I mean, Matt, I don't have a perfect answer, as you just said. As you were talking, something came to my mind and went out the door. But I mean, I didn't technically have the experience, but there were things that I was involved in with doing that work. I also think of employee resource groups. I think of different leadership opportunities that we have in our company where you can get other skill set too, that you can work on things. So I think there is ways to get it, but you also, Kelly touched on it, I think Emily did, you got to also sell that about yourself. Let people know the skills that you have that conversation with your leader to tell them where you want to go. Right. I know a lot of people do think sometimes it's up to everybody else to help us guide our career. We got to advocate for ourselves, and you have to know where you want to go. And maybe you have to make, as Kelly said, a tough choice and decide to leave. And if you can't find the right opportunity, possibly.
Yeah, makes good sense. I think the other thing is, and you mentioned the sales word. I've talked about it before on the show, that we really have to lean into our selling skills, our influencing skills, and that means doing exactly what you said, Kelly, which is follow the money. Like when you can make a business case for this experience, and you're like, nobody's doing it now, and if I don't have the experience, you haven't handed me anything that I haven't been able to tackle, and there's real money in this, there's real business value in me doing this thing. Like that's part of the salespersonship skills that we need to have. In addition to advocating for ourselves, you still always have to create value for the organization and just be super clear about how you're positioning that value and saying, if you don't put me in this spot to gain that experience, like we're missing an opportunity here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being able to shape what I'm interested in, gaining experience with is very, very important. And telling as many people as you work with, we all have a lot of coworkers every day and we have daily interactions with. And I think isolating it to a capability or competency or a skill you're looking to build. There's project work. I know it's sort of many times people say, well, that's just additive to my plate, right? And you're right, it is. It absolutely is. But many times that's a gateway to being able to say, hey, I'd like to work on the OKR project or the KPI project at a corporate level. If there's any opportunity for me to do so, please let me know. I'm willing to step in and step out. That just gives you the exposure that you might need. And showcases that you're leaning into broadening your capabilities.
I love it. Well, audience, thanks so much for those questions. I'm going to ask Rachel to pull the slides back up, and I've just really enjoyed the conversation. I'm going to get back to our panelists in just a second, but we have a couple of things that I need your help with. The first is this one. I have this headline of community conversations. We held a conference relatively recently, and what I was amazed by was how many of our PI users were kind of talking to one another. People on the show, I saw, for example, in the chat, y'all are so supportive of one another. My question is, would you be interested in a community opportunity here to participate by having us introduce you to one another? So imagine the Perspectives audience getting small group introductions, 3 at a time, just meeting some other people who are like-minded, who want to advance in your HR careers and talk about all the great things you're doing from a talent optimization perspective. If that's of interest and you go ahead and indicate so in the Zoom poll that's up on your screen, we'd love to be able to go through a process and just kind of selecting people, matching them up, and making some introductions and let you take the conversation from there. And you don't even have to worry about awkward silences. I'm going to give you a tip sheet to kind of break the ice until you get to know each other, and then you'll just have a nice little conversation with like-minded people. So if that's something you'd be interested in, we'd love to connect the dots for you on that. So thanks for helping us out with that. I'll check those poll results later, Rachel. Next one is also going to be a link that's in the chat. We're always interested in bringing on amazing panelists like the ones you have for you today. But, you know people that I don't. Like, here's Mel Robbins on the screen. Mel doesn't return my calls these days. But if you have somebody other than Mel, who would you like to be a future Perspectives panelist? Maybe you have a subject matter expert, somebody that you know and respect, and you're like, I'd love to have them on the air. And let's, talk about topics that they're perhaps good at and just let us know. And Rachel and I will do our best to go pull them on the show for you, because we want to make sure we get really great voices like Kelly and Amy and Emily on the show for you. And so that would help us out if you just have somebody that you'd like us to go chase down. All right, next slide we have is about our panelists. You might have some questions or just you want to follow because we've got great things to say all the time. Kelly, Emily, Amy, and myself, you're going to find the LinkedIn links into our LinkedIn profiles, I should say. Inside the chat, you'll find them also in the follow-up in the email tomorrow. That's a great place to get in touch with us. And you've also got a couple of websites on there too for Teladoc Health and Duck Creek if you want to learn more about those organizations. Next, we have the takeaways. So in this case, we've got Amy talking about a live podcast she's got coming up called The Power of Us, Belonging Connection at Work with Amy Bayer. So it's on the People Forward Network. Jason Barnes is going to be having that on June 17th. So there's going to be a link in the follow-up materials tomorrow where you can learn more about how to check that out. For Emily, she's got PI's new ebook on how HR can combat perception bias. It's a very interesting take about being seen at work, if you will. So you can take a look at that link if you'd like to follow up with that. Kelly wants to make sure that you're able to check out Teladoc Health's Resource Center, which is a collection of curated insights and expertise for organizations to optimize their care delivery, enhance patient outcomes, and improve employee wellness. So you'll find that link in your follow-up materials tomorrow. And for myself, I'm promoting my Lead the People podcast episode where I got to sit down with Amy Bayer from our panel. And I got to hear from her and talk all about her overcoming sort of any internal barriers she had and finding the role that she now has and loves and wants to do for a long, long time. So it's a really special story. So hopefully you'll hear that on our airwaves. Next, we're going to bring up the book giveaway. We have Susan Barr. Susan, thanks so much for joining the show today. You were the random book giveaway winner. I'd love to scoot off a copy of my leadership book, Expand the Circle. That'd be awesome. We'll go one more slide here. Tip sheet. So we created a tip sheet for you on navigation tips on how to navigate your HR career for personal and professional advancement. So you can download it, forward it to a friend who might be struggling in their own HR career. If it serves you well, then I'll be very happy about that. So you'll be getting that tomorrow as well in your follow-up materials. And last but not least, we're going to ask you to join us next month in July, assuming you're not on vacation, like Rachel and I will be here. Quiet cracking, it's a new term that has showed up, and this is all about how HR can recognize and solve this silent management crisis. We can't be having quiet cracking. It's bad for business, bad for people. So we're going to be talking all about that topic at 2 o'clock on Wednesday, July 16th, which is the same sort of time as today. So with that, I'm going to close this out and say thank you so much to our panel. Kelly, Amy, Emily, you've shared your advice, your experience, your journey. You've been very transparent with us and given us great advice. Really appreciate each of you sharing with our audience. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. It was a great experience. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Awesome. And thanks so much, of course, to our sponsor, the Predictive Index, for making talent optimization dreams come true all over the world. But biggest thanks of all to our audience. Thanks for being with us today. Hope to see you again next month. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy your next sessions.
Thank you.
Bye.